very about how to do Buddhism. For me, in my practice, Buddhism is not about believing in um, a deity. It's not about believing in anything supernatural. It's not about really anything esoteric. It's about getting real with what's real and creating a skill set to be able to change reactions into healthy responses, and then hence is our freedom from suffering, which that's the purpose of Buddhism, is to free ourselves from suffering. So Buddhism for me is not something to believe in. Now, when I say believe in, I have conviction and I have trust in the practice, but that comes from my own direct experience. And the Buddha talked about that. The Buddha said, don't believe what I say, experience it for yourself. And Buddhism urges us to investigate our own personal direct experience, and it's always going to be different. And that's going to direct each one of our practices. So the Buddha even said, when a teaching doesn't resonate with you, then let it go. If it did resonate for a period of time, but now it's no longer of use, let it go. We Buddhism tells us never to be stuck, and stuck is another word for attached. The self and our lives are an ebbing, flowing, constantly changing experience. And when we don't, attachment is when we don't let that natural ebb and flow um, happen. But for me, Buddhism again is something I do. It's a skill set. Skill sets involve repetitious, habitual practice. So for me, when we say Buddhist practice, it means constantly trying, doing, failing, learning, changing, trying again, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work. Um, so it's this constant, almost scientific experiment, for lack of better words, because what we do is we have a hypothesis and we test that theory and we look at the evidence and we make a determination from evidence. But just like a scientist, we're not beholden to teachings or to practices where the evidence tells us not to be. So I'm not saying we suddenly become our own teachers in this, because that can be a slippery slope. We don't want to use this, what I'm talking about, as a way to pursue things or avoid things that are harmful. And it can slip into that. You know, it, it's not us always just determining what's best for us, because if we do that and we don't have complete freedom from ego attachment, it's always going to be a bit tainted or twisted to serve our ego. But that said, the more we do it, the better we can get at being clear about our intentions and make right choices. Because the reality is nobody's going to make them for us. Yeah, we can get advice from our teachers or friends we trust, but ultimately we have to make our own choices. The teachings don't give us the answers. They teach us the way to find the right answers for ourselves through this investigation, through the evidence, and through um, taking that evidence, seeing what it determines, and creating what I'm going to choose to do from that point. So, but that said, the teachings give us a blueprint for how to live our lives. So, and please, if you have a question or comment at any point, just chime in. Um, so the first Buddhist teachings, the Four Noble Truths, tell us that suffering exists. There's a beginning to it, an end to it, and a path to the end to it. The beginning is attachment, the end of suffering is breaking attachment, and the path is the 8 practices. there's three truths of suffering: pain, change, conditionality. Pain stems from the mind and body. Change stems from impermanence. Conditionality is understanding that we misunderstand the self. And I'll touch upon each one a tiny bit. We don't suffer from pain. We suffer because we avoid pain. With impermanence and change, we suffer because we resist change. We want reality to conform to how we'd like it to be. And to try to make this happen, we pursue and avoid things. But reality will never conform to how we want it to be exactly. And the more it won't, the more we pursue and avoid, and the more we pursue and avoid, the more it won't. So the freedom from suffering over impermanence and change is that we don't resist change. We accept things how they are rather than trying to make them the way we want them to be, and we will not suffer if we do that. Now, that doesn't mean we don't do work in our lives to attain goals and achieve things and try to, live a life that we want to live. It means we can't be attached to outcomes. We just accept, do what we can, and not be attached to being rigid. We have to have a pliability, a flexibility, a spaciousness to accept things as they are. And often things are pretty close to the way we want them to be, but we won't accept them because they're not exact, right? They're not perfectly the way we want them to be. And here's the real kick in the butt, is we suffer when they are, the rare occurrences when they are exactly the way we want them to be, we suffer over that. Why? Because we already intrinsically know they're going to end and change. We don't want that. So we start clinging. And when they start dissipating and slipping through our grasp, we start pursuing, trying to hold on to it and recreate it. So we ruin the good things by thinking about how they won't last. So we get caught up in being sad or lamenting their passing when we could be enjoying them. So a kind of joke I use to talk about this is, we all love going on vacation. We go through all the stress and hassle of tying up all the loose ends and taking care of all the preparations. And, we usually book it 6 months out. So, we have all this time of anticipation, and it just builds and builds, which, when it's building, makes everything else seem worse, right? Our work seems shittier because we just can't wait to be on vacation. And stress seems worse because we just can't wait to get away and relieve our stress. But that's another side of that. But we finally get to the day of vacation. We go through all the hassle. The plane's delayed. It's crowded. Someone next to us is coughing in our face. The TV behind the seat doesn't work. We get there. All this shit that happens. We finally get out to the beach and we sit down and we turn to whoever we're with and we say, I can't believe we got to go home in 7 days. And already we're undermining, we're sabotaging the way we're experiencing things. So that might just resonate with me. I don't know if that resonates with you, but in terms of impermanence, there's nothing we can do about it, but yet we get caught up in being upset with impermanence rather than accepting it and enjoying what we have while we have it. So, and the third truth of suffering is conditionality, which just simply means everything's based on temporary conditions. Nothing's fixed and permanent. It's empty of any permanency, any final state. So when we talk about conditionality, it's about everything, but particularly this teaching is about the self. So it doesn't mean we don't exist, doesn't mean we don't have a unique personal experience. It simply means that when we're attached to a false sense of ego, when we're attached to a false sense of self, to a construct, an idea of self we've created in our minds, we think that this is a permanent, fixed self and that all the conditions are inherent within us. But we come to practice to liberate and transform. But how can we liberate and transform what we believe to be fixed and permanent? We can't. So the true liberation we're looking for is to break attachment, to let go of identifying with the ego, identifying with the idea of self. And I don't mean the idea of self is not true. It's just that the idea of self makes everything fixed and permanent.